is 11 a.m. on a Thursday morning in gorgeous Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Time once again for Southern Fried Sports on your home for University of Alabama Athletics. Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, part of the 24/7 Sports.com network, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. The show, as always, brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Me and my boy Goodbread. You know, we had lunch yesterday right after the program. We had lunch at Southern Ale House. I've been on sort of that chopped wedge salad. Really, really good stuff. And look, it's good for you. You know, it is a salad, but the sort of secret weapon for that chopped wedge salad at Southern Ale House, it's those biscuit croutons. They've got those homemade biscuit croutons that go on top. So, you know, I've got more of a hankering for that than I do the fresh iceberg lettuce or the fresh grape tomatoes, or you can get it with the blue cheese crumbles with the blue cheese dressing. All the dressings there, pretty much house made, by the way, at Southern Ale House. But Goodbread and I went from the bar side lunch, where you can find us probably about at least once a week. We went right next door. We went to Peterbrook Chocolatier, and we were blessed. We were blessed on Wednesday. The chocolate lady decided that she wanted to use Goodbread and myself as sort of these testers, taste testers for some of the new items they've got there at Peterbrook Chocolatier. Yeah. Yes, me and Goodbread said in unison. We would be glad to do that, and it was outstanding stuff. Joined, as always, on the program by Josh Smith, executive producer of Southern Fried Sports, who together we combine to form the 60-Minute Man of Sports Talk Radio. Josh, how you doing on this Thursday morning?
Hey, Trav, it's been one of those, you know, we're still kind of recovering from that last night in Baton Rouge. I mean, that can go a couple of different ways, but no, just watching the way the game started last night, kind of seemed like everyone was kind of in their own kind of funk and never really got to that initial status quo that we've seen in other games where their shots weren't hitting, they weren't really rebounding the same. They just seemed off last night. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a weird. Yeah, I was going to get into that. It was a weird game, really, from the outset. You learned that Beetle Bolden's out for the game. He's not going to be able to come off the bench. He's dealing with an illness of some kind. John Petty doesn't start the game. That was different. So a little bit of a weird feel from that game from the outset. And it's not like LSU just came right out the gates and boat raced Alabama last night. It was more of that sort of methodical beat down. It almost felt like one of the sort of retro Alabama football games, you know, where in the run the damn ball days of Nick Saban football at Alabama, where, you know, there would be some games and the score would be like 24-10 or something in the third quarter. And so based on the margin, you felt like, well, this game's not over. It's not over. Well, you knew it was over because Alabama was going to turn like the last quarter and a half of those games into the equivalent of a commercial break. That's how long those second halves seemed to take back in the day. And that was kind of the feel of that game last night. Alabama had a couple opportunities there in the second half, came out second half after trailing big at the break, trailing by 18, gave up 51 points in the first half last night to LSU. Came out in the second half, got off to a decent enough start, had it to about, 9 there at one point. Had a chance to cut it to maybe 7 or 6. You had a couple of turnovers in a row. That lead went right back to 15. And that was pretty much it. But the story of the night, and something we sort of previewed throughout the week, we talked about it with Cecil Hurt yesterday on the show, just sort of that physical superiority that LSU presents to a lot of teams, not just Alabama. Maybe Kentucky, maybe Mississippi State. Mississippi State with Reggie Perry, Woodard, those kind of guys, Abdul. You've got some guys that can, in terms of stature and dogness. Remember we talked about dogs yesterday on the show? You're going to have some dog last night. Alabama didn't have enough dog. And look, you can have all the mindset. You can have the requisite focus and effort and all those things. Sometimes you just don't have enough dogs, period. And that's kind of where Alabama is right now, you know. Lest we forget, this is a shorthanded Alabama roster. And so when you look at LSU and you think about Skylar Mays and you think about Javonte Smart and you think about Trendon Watford, who was outstanding, the freshman from Mountain Brock last night, 17 and 15 for Trendon Watford last night. LSU also has guys like Marlon Taylor, who's a JUCO transfer from a year ago. And he's got some dog in him. Well, maybe your equivalent of Marlon Taylor this year would have been James Rojas, another junior college transfer that you were sort of bringing in to help you from a maturity standpoint and kind of a versatile guy that you could play at multiple spots, help you in the post a little bit, stand out on the perimeter, face up the basket. Well, you don't have that kind of dude either. But LSU's really good. I mean, if that LSU from last night shows up in the NCAA tournament, good luck getting them out of there. Now, they could have a night where they just don't shoot it well, especially from three. But with the way they get after it on the backboard, really, you anticipated a pretty wide margin there between LSU and Alabama last night, and that certainly came to fruition. LSU with an advantage of 18 rebounds on the glass last night. But Alabama, a couple of the staples for this team, especially when things are going well, efficient from the three-point line, made 10 threes last night, but took 38, Alabama did. So that's 26%. And an Alabama team that has gotten to the free throw line at a very high rate. That did not happen last night. Just 10 trips to the line, 6 makes. Meanwhile, LSU goes 19 of 20 from the free throw line. So, you lose by 14, pretty much a wire-to-wire job. Not all that hard to find out where things went in favor of the homestanding LSU Tigers. 205-342-9904. That is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. We're going to get into some Tua talk coming up a little bit later in the program as well. Tua making the rounds down there in South Florida on Media Row in anticipation of in advance of Sunday's Super Bowl matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. We'll get into some of that a little bit later in the program as well. First, though, let's go to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line and check in with Donald on this Thursday morning. Donald, how you doing?
Pretty good, Travis. How you doing, old buddy?
I'm hanging in there, my man.
Well, Bama's licking their wounds this morning from last night. I mean, they got handled pretty good, to be honest with you, and kind of discouraged about the fact that John Petty didn't start the game because practice habits. Apparently some bad practice habits. And the coach had to bench him for the first 4 minutes of the game. And not saying that would have made a difference in the game. Still, that's not a good way to start the game. And, of course, Beetle Bolden, I don't even know if he made the trip last night to get sick and all that. So their backs were against the wall going in, which didn't find out until after the game started. But nonetheless, got to put it behind them. They got a big game against Arkansas on Saturday, and the home stretch starts on Saturday, and they put themselves in a position where they have a chance to accomplish their goals of getting in the NCAA tournament, regardless of last night. But it is concerning about the rebounding numbers over the last 2 games because, now granted, they don't, like you said, they don't have the alpha dogs that LSU had last night because of the thin roster. However, one thing that they've been preaching all year long is that as a collective group, all 5 players on the floor have to be able to rebound to make up for that loss. And last night they certainly didn't do that. Plus their defense was awful. When you give up 90 points, I mean, they were laying LSU into the middle of the lane at will. I mean, I don't know how many 5-10 foot running jumpers they took in the middle of the lane. Yeah. That was discouraging in terms of the defense if they didn't challenge these shooters a little bit better.
Well, and Donald, you knew that was going to be a problem because there's a reason why LSU leads the SEC in field goal percentage. It's because they are very adept against just about anybody at getting into the paint. And more than half of LSU's points last night, 50 of LSU's 90 points in the game last night came from the paint. And they have guys like Skylar Mays, Smart. Trendon Watford can handle the basketball and get to the rim, even as a 6'8", 6'9" guy. So that was going to be the primary challenge last night. As I talked about with Cecil yesterday, I'm sure if you're Will Wade and you're sitting in there with your team and you're going through your scout for Alabama, you're thinking, with these matchups against Kyra and Petty and Shackelford and even Herb Jones to an extent, we're going to get downhill on these guys. And, that's LSU's MO, man, against anybody. In terms of matchups, that was going to be tough for Alabama last night. And, you're right, though. It's over. You've got 3 games coming up that are certainly winnable, starting on Saturday evening with Arkansas here. Arkansas with a tough home loss last night to a surging South Carolina team there in Fayetteville. You get Tennessee Tuesday night of next week, Tennessee coming off a loss. And you got all these 4-3 teams now. You got 6 teams in the Southeastern Conference right now at 4-3. And a lot of this is going to play out, Donald, in the next week, because you're going to have Arkansas at 4-3 here in Tuscaloosa against Alabama that's 4-3. You're going to have Mississippi State hosting Tennessee on Saturday. Both those teams 4-3. Tennessee going to come here next Tuesday. So, that log jam it's sort of tied for 4th right now. Should get a little bit of some separation in there.
Well, the thing about it is for Alabama, looking forward, is because of what they've accomplished during the month of January, and they're 4-3 at the end of the month. That's the best you can hope for at this point with the schedule they've played, and their 3 losses that have come against the 3 of the so-called favorites in the league on the road. They have put themselves in a position where they can make a run for the NCAA tournament. Now, nobody wants to talk about that, but the thing about it is they are in a position to do that.
Sure they are.
And you can't tell me that Nate Oates hasn't talked about that, because he's been talking about it pretty much all year. So they do have a chance, but they've got the schedule in front of them that if they win these next 3 games, win those 3, find a way to split Auburn and LSU. And with LSU coming in here, I like our chances better here than I did down there. And also, if we can split those 2 and then win out the rest of our home games from there and maybe, beat Missouri at the end of the season, because Missouri is entirely beatable, which we already know. And they can finish possibly 11-7 or 12-6 in the league potentially. I think 11-7 gets them in the tournament. 12-6 definitely gets them in. Everybody's talking about they need to beat this team or they need to beat that team. It's not a matter of necessarily what you beat, who you beat or anything, or when you beat them. You just got to get wins, because their overall schedule will be an advantage for them over some of these other teams. And, we need to look at that as the month of February goes along. But also, that being said, our history of playing in February has not been good over the last 3 or 4 years, and we got to turn that sucker around right starting Saturday night. And because if we want to accomplish anything, we got to overcome that bugaboo right there.
No doubt about it. Hey, Donald, we appreciate the phone call, my friend.
Thanks, Travis. Have a great day.
There he goes, Donald checking in on Alabama basketball. And, yeah, it's tough to sort of look ahead and try to project wins for just about any team in this league right now. We tried that even in the last week here, because a week and a half or so ago, you looked at the final 6 games in the regular season for this Alabama team, and you saw home games at the time with A&M, with South Carolina and Vanderbilt. And then you saw road games with Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Missouri. Now, some of that still holds true in terms of the viability of getting wins in those final 3 weeks of the regular season. If you can get to sort of those final 6 at, say, 7-5, then some scenarios that Donald laid out there for you at 11-7 and 12-6 are still possible. But I'll tell you this much, Texas A&M doesn't look as much like a sure W right now, does it, as it did a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. South Carolina definitely doesn't look as sure of a W here in Tuscaloosa as it did a week and a half ago. South Carolina, again, goes into Fayetteville last night and gets a 2-point win on the road. Vanderbilt, okay. Vanderbilt played better last night against Kentucky, but you still think here in Tuscaloosa you're going to be able to take care of the Commodores. Road game at Ole Miss. Ole Miss has been better the last couple of games, getting a road win at Georgia, playing Auburn into double overtime, a game in which Ole Miss really let get away, had a 19-point lead over Auburn there early in the second half. Mississippi State on the road doesn't look like the W it did after you run-ruled basically State here in Tuscaloosa a couple weeks ago. State now has won 4 straight SEC games after that road win at Florida on Tuesday night. And Missouri, okay, that's a game on the road that you still think you should be able to take care of. But it's gotten a lot tougher. It's kind of turned around in a lot of ways. That sort of middle of the pack to the bottom tier of the SEC where, Alabama's still in a tie for 4th right now. Again, a logjam of 4-3 teams in the league, of which Alabama is a member of that crew. And a lot of that's going to play out here in the next week and a half or so, at least in terms of getting some separation from those 6 teams. Back with more of Southern Fried Sports on a Thursday, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier right here on Tide 100.9 FM right after this. Thursday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. We are wide open on this Thursday, guest free. So if you'd like to jump on board with us at 205-342-9904, you are more than welcome to do so. We got late night with the Bows tonight, huh? Late night with those Rainbow Wahine. There you go, the University of Hawaii. We've got the Anteaters of UC Irvine coming over to the island of Oahu tonight. That's an 11 o'clock Central tip. So we'll have the old Apple TV fired up in the master bedroom. Have that 60-inch HD with that Apple TV cranking. Spectrum Sports, my favorite color analyst, Laura Santi, doing the coverage there for us. So we'll have that at 11 on Spectrum Sports out of Honolulu. We're trying to get to 500 overall for the season and a game over 500 in Big West play. So we got a big one tonight. I'm going to go down. I'm going to take the youngest daughter down to Coleman tonight. Should be an entertaining women's basketball game between the Alabama women's team and the Arkansas Razorbacks. Another chance for this Alabama team to get a win over a top 25 opponent. Been close. Certainly had an opportunity twice here of late. Well, certainly against Texas A&M in a tough home loss, but came back over the weekend, played really well against Vanderbilt. 37-point win over Vanderbilt. So you're going to have the Arkansas ladies taking on the Alabama women's team at 7 o'clock tonight at Coleman. So probably go catch that one with Tater Tot at 7. Come home, fire up about 7 pots of coffee and try to stay awake. I'll stay awake. I get that juice going, man. That hashtag daddy, girl dad thing, cranks up. By 11, I'm ready to go. By tomorrow at 11 a.m., I don't know if I'll be ready to go, but we'll do the best we can. You probably saw this yesterday, Alabama, or last night, I think this came down the pike. Alabama football picking up a verbal commitment from grad transfer Carl Tucker, who we've talked about on the show. Carl going to be a 6th-year senior, so you're going to have a veteran presence in a couple of ways at tight end for Alabama in the 2020 season. You're going to have Carl Tucker to go along with Miller Forrestall. And watching some of the, I kind of went into this with Carl Tucker thinking, well, he must be just the classic inline tight end type. But you go back and you watch, especially his 2018 tape there at North Carolina, he was used basically like Miller Forrestall is for the most part at Alabama. 3 wide receiver sets, flex him out. Didn't really throw the ball to him a ton, but they would get him out in the slot. Now, this was more of the Larry Fedora offense. Now we got Mac Brown, as we know. has come back in for that second stint there in Chapel Hill. But in terms of his usage a couple seasons ago, it'll be a good fit from a standpoint of offensively, conceptually, pretty similar to what Alabama's doing right now. But it is interesting that he is a guy that, based on his tape, flexes out a lot. He does play inline a little bit in what I've seen of him. But Alabama's still going to need that kind of guy. But he'll certainly, give you sort of a depth provider for sure, too. If something were to happen to Miller Forrestall, we know 2 out of the last 3 years, Miller's unfortunately had some injuries that have cost him pretty extended stretches of time. Also today, I noticed Tua Tagovailoa making the rounds down there in South Florida on the Super Bowl media row. Some video of Tua down there this morning, and looks like he's moving around pretty good, walking around. I wouldn't say he's nimble, just looking at some of the clips from down there this morning, but hitting a lot of the major media outlets, and some of his comments remain consistent. His agent, Lee Steinberg, down there with him, talking to some media outlets as well. And Tua apparently, a week from Monday, going to have a pretty important doctor's appointment. Going to get a CT scan done on that hip to sort of get a better understanding of exactly where it's at in the healing and recovery process. And then that'll largely determine sort of the protocol moving forward for Tua, who, again, the plan, mile markers in the draft process, want to get to the combine and to the medical evaluations that are so extensive up there in Indianapolis, want to get to that spot, sort of that mile marker, in as good a shape as you can. And then Steinberg, his agent, keeps pointing to the real potential to work out for teams prior to the April draft. Now, that doesn't mean, if you talk about Alabama's pro day as another one of those mile markers, and you think about typically early to mid-March is when you see the pro day here in Tuscaloosa, now, that may not mean that Tua is ready by that point. But again, with how the draft sort of staggers into later April, maybe early to mid-April, Tua able to get out there and throw it around at least a little bit, maybe a limited script that he's able to abide by in front of some NFL clubs in advance of the 2020 NFL draft. We got Sunday's Super Bowl first, though. We got to get through the Super Bowl. It just seems like the Super Bowl, the time between the conference championships games and the actual Super Bowl, it just seems like it's about the same as the time between the conference championship games and the NFL draft, but it's not. It's not. It's only 2 weeks. And we talked about that yesterday. More and more siding with the San Francisco 49ers against my better judgment. I know. I jumped on the Titans too in that AFC championship game. I went old school. I jumped on those broad shoulders of Derrick Henry, and it didn't work out so good. So we'll see if there's a change in that with a similar approach that is taken by the San Francisco 49ers. Can Jimmy G make enough plays? Can that passing game for the Niners make enough plays? Didn't really have to make any plays against the Packers. But as good as that Niners defense is, still have to think, more so than was the case against Green Bay, going to need the quarterback and the receivers to step forward. George Kittle's tight end position. There's prop bets, by the way. Always those Super Bowl prop bets, man. Who's going to score the first touchdown? Will the coin toss be heads or tails? How long will the national anthem go? All those things. You can bet on anything coming up this Sunday with the Super Bowl. Going to step aside for another break. When we come back, more Southern Fried Sports on a Thursday, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier, right here on Tide 100.9 FM, right after this. Talking about that grad transfer commitment of Carl Tucker, the tight end from the University of North Carolina. choosing the Alabama Crimson Tide over Florida State. 6'2", 248 pounds. Carl Tucker right now, you can go to BamaOnline.com. Hank South, my colleague there, has a really good in-depth interview with Carl Tucker. If you want more details on that, I would certainly encourage you to make your way over to BOL right now. We're going to make our way back to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line at 205-342-9904 and check in with Joe on a Thursday morning. Joe, how you doing?
We played 8 last night. Of course, if Beetle would have made the trip, would have played 9. LSU played 7. That's all he ever plays is 7. And, you know, he has to have a huge lead at the end of the game before he will even break that. I don't know how much you watch them. But my point is I saw 2 teams that cannot afford a late-season injury at all. You agree with that?
Oh, I would certainly agree with that. And you're right. I mean, LSU, they had 7 guys that played, and the minimum minutes for those 7 was 16. So they rotate. It's not like they play 7 and their 7th guy plays 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, they've got a solid 7 that they are very dependent upon. You know, and I think for Alabama, again, we'll never really know, Joe, but some of the injuries that LSU can afford going forward, I think Alabama's probably already sustained some of those. You know, because of Rojas and those and Quinterly, if you want to count Quinterly as that kind of guy and not being able to get his waiver approved. So, there's no doubt about it.
Tempo, we're going to have more players, which we will, and that's not his fault. You know what I mean? He inherited what he got, but he saved Kyra and he saved Petty. But I want to ask you this. Do you think Wade recruits like a golf coach? Do you think he goes out here and says, look, I'm going to have 7 players. I'm going to guarantee you playing time. I'm only going to offer you 75%, but you're going to get to play. You know, you follow me on that? You understand what I'm saying?
Well,
I've got some nieces that are one's at UAB right now. Another one's being recruited right now. And I got another one coming after her, the Allen girls up in Northside. And it's amazing on this recruiting. A lot of schools will say, well, I've only got 6. I've only got 7. But you're only going to get 75%. Well, you can get a full ride, but you got 9 or 10 players. And, you understand where I'm coming from.
Sure.
With golf. Do you think he recruits that way in basketball? I'm going to play a 7-man rotation, and I guarantee you, if you sign with me, you're part of that rotation next year.
You know, there may be something to that. You know, the other side of that is if you're the kid being recruited and you see he's got 12 or 13 on scholarship, what if you don't end up being one of those 7 though? So
exactly.
You gotta kind of weigh some things. But you know how it is. You're around kids that are recruited, and really, regardless of the sport, and it's understandable because when we're 17, 18 years old, we feel like, we're Superman or Superwoman. We can go into any situation and we're going to be a central figure in whatever happens in that particular program or that team moving forward. But, if you're trending Watford and you're being recruited by just about everybody, you're probably not as worried about that. You're thinking, I'm going to be one of the 5. Forget about the 7. But you're right. And that's where, you can go JUCO too and sort of fill some gaps. And one of those 7 for LSU is a junior college guy, Marlon Taylor.
Right. You made that point a while ago. But
and Alabama's guy, before the season even starts, he has a knee injury,
Who's going to replace Mays? He's not playing anybody. He doesn't have anybody. He's not playing anybody. So he's going to have to go out here and either sign a super stud freshman. I don't know. He might have already have, for all I know. I don't keep up with who he's recruited, or a JUCO route, just like you said. Mm-hmm. But, last year he had Mays and Waters, Yeah,
he did. But there are so many avenues that you can go now, as you know, too, Joe. The grad transfer route is very much in play now. JC, kids in hoops, it just seems like more and more are so ready to play so early. I mean, we've got so many of these kids now. Look at Kyra. I mean, they reclassify now. They're essentially seniors in high school. And so it's not just these seniors for the class of 2020 that you're going to and maybe making that pitch that you're talking about that, hey, come here, you can look at what we've got here with our rotation and you're going to be in it from day one. If there's a junior out there that's good enough, you can sell reclassification to that player and say, we're not worried about 2021, 2022. We need you to go ahead and come in 2020, 2021. So, man, it is.
Hey, one more question, Travis.
Multi-dynamic,
Where is Kyra in the mock draft now?
Kyra? Mm-hmm. I would think, I haven't really perused any of those. I would think that, when you look at sort of Kyra, Herb Jones, Petty, I would think second round right now would probably be where their ceiling is right now. And with Kyra, it's probably more due to kind of his physical stature. Is he at a point physically where he can handle it, in the NBA? Now, his versatility in his game and his ability to get to the rim we know about. But, I would say second round. If I looked around, I would think that would be the case.
Well, the reason why I asked a couple of games back, they had him late first, early second. Okay. And they had Petty and Jones both in the second round. Yeah,
that would make sense. I mean, Kyra's dynamic now.
Man, I appreciate your show. Appreciate your input on that. I enjoy it.
Hey, thanks, Joe. We appreciate the phone call. There he goes, Joe checking in. Yeah, I mean, the thing about Kyra is he's going to get the basketball where he wants it to go. Now, as we've seen, sometimes against some physically superior type teams like an LSU or more so maybe a Kentucky, it can be tough to finish at the rim, based on Kyra's build and, kind of where he's at physically. And there's also the other side of that. You got to guard somebody in the NBA too. And so if I'm an NBA scout last night, if I'm at that Alabama LSU game and I'm watching Kyra, I'm probably not paying as much attention to even what he's able to do offensively, because I kind of know that. I know he's got that absolutely devastating first step off the bounce. I know he's got sustainable range with his jump shot when I start trying to project that to the next level, more so than even probably Colin Sexton had coming out after a year at Alabama. I think in terms of three-point shooting ability and range, I think Kyra maybe is more advanced in that regard. But you do have to guard people too. And that's where it could be something that perhaps NBA people scrutinize more with Kyra based on his measurables than even on the offensive end of the floor. 205-342-9904. That's the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. If you would like to check in on this Thursday, we'd love to hear from you. Josh and I were talking during the break. You got a big weekend coming up in Tuscaloosa, not just because you have the Alabama men's basketball team returning home for a critical matchup. Talk about an Arkansas team that's going to be pretty hungry in its own right. Kind of let one get away last night at home, although watching that game with South Carolina, to its credit, kind of controlled things throughout in that 2-point win over the Razorbacks. You're going to have Arkansas, Alabama hoops, but you're going to have one of those Junior Day events coming up. You see, speaking of basketball and football coming together, did you see Nick Saban a couple of nights ago over in North Carolina? Nick Saban and Sark, never too early, never too busy than to check on your 2021 quarterback recruit, Drake May. Drake May over there in the state of North Carolina. That May family, they can play a little basketball too, those Mays from North Carolina. You saw Nick Saban and Steve Sarkisian taking in a little hoops action. Drake May can throw it. If you haven't checked him out yet, I know we've been so much into Bryce Young, and understandably so. Again, Bryce Young here in the last couple of days has been elevated to the number 1 overall prospect for the 2020 recruiting cycle by 247sports.com, and the dude's got it. There's no question about that. Even at 5'11", 180, 185 pounds, he's special. But Drake May ain't bad. You talk about having a nice little sort of 1-2 punch already stacked up there at the quarterback position with Bryce Young and then Drake May for 2021. Alabama in a really good spot from the quarterback perspective, even if you have some attrition and some fallout coming from this upcoming competition between Mac Jones and Bryce Young and Tua Tagovailoa. You got another one. You got another one in the pipeline in Drake May.
And Trav, do you think he's also kind of scouting ahead for, he has these noon basketball games, so you think he's already kind of getting a feel for a future teammate there?
Yeah, I don't think he lets the players play in those so much. I think that's pretty much coaching staff only. But, yeah, I think if it takes that maybe to get a guy like Drake May, maybe you throw that in too. Yeah, you can play in the NBA, Noontime Basketball Association over there that Nick and the assistant coach is. I think they still play. Nick's almost 70 years old, still balling. Got to give it to the man. But, yeah, I mean, that's a quarterback situation that is in good shape, and it won't hurt. It won't hurt in April, assuming Tua Tagovailoa is a first-round pick. He'll sort of check the boxes for every down position, guys. Anyway, right? What's the one spot where Alabama hasn't had a first-round pick under Nick Saban? Quarterback. Looks like Tua is going to take care of that in April. Back with more of Southern Fried Sports on a Thursday, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier, right here on Tide 100.9 FM, right after this.
Just as I thought it was going all right, I found out I'm wrong when I thought it was right. It's always the same, it's just a shame, that's all. I could say day and you'd say night. Tell me it's black when I know that it's white. Always the same, it's just a shame, and that's all. I could leave, but I won't go, though my heart might tell me so. I can't feel a thing from my head down to my toes. But why does it always seem to be me looking at you with you looking at me? It's always the same, it's just a shame, that's all.
On this day in 1951, that guy, Phil Collins, pretty prolific solo career, kind of got it going as the drummer and then lead vocalist there for Genesis, one of the very first albums back in the days before albums were more necessity than nostalgia. Everybody's back into this vinyl craze now. It's more of a nostalgia thing is what that is. Back in the day, man, late 70s or so, that's what you bought. You didn't even really have cassettes, bro. You had vinyl. That was it. That was Genesis, one of the first albums, Abacab, one of the first albums I ever had by Genesis. Phil Collins, 68 years old today. 205-342-9904. That's the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line if you'd like to jump on board with us here in the final few moments of today's program. Hey, I'm seeing where the University of Florida has hired former Gator quarterback and USF offensive coordinator Kerwin Bell. Kerwin Bell, the throwing Mayoan. That's right. The native of Mayo, Florida, the metropolis of Mayo, Florida, down there. Looks like Kerwin's headed back to Gainesville. One and done stint there with USF. Charlie Strong getting the Ziggy there. So Kerwin and that crew went out with him. But, Kerwin actually had a very successful stint as a head coach on the Division II level at Valdosta State, then made the jump to Tampa as the OC for the Bulls. And again, that was a one-year move. But now it looks like Kerwin is going to be an offensive analyst for the Florida Gators under Dan Mullen. You also have some pro golf on the cable this weekend involving some former Alabama products. Justin Thomas out there today at the Waste Management Phoenix Open in the Scottsdale area. Justin Thomas is even par through 10 holes. He teed off on the back 9, so he is working through the front 9, which is his back 9, in the opening round of the 2020 Waste Management Phoenix Open. He is even par. Otherwise, Robbie Shelton +1 through 14 holes. Teeing off right about now, Bud Cauley, former University of Alabama All-American. And then you also have Trey Mullinex with the Alabama Ties going off a little bit later on this afternoon at 1:05. Tuscaloosa resident, our product anyway, Patton Kazire, is even par through 8 holes this morning to get his opening round underway out there at what is one of the more raucous events you'll ever see on a professional golf tour. That 16th hole, how they have that stadium effect there at the par 3, you know? Yeah. Justin Thomas went through there this morning and he donned a Kobe Bryant jersey before his tee shot there. So little tribute from Justin Thomas to Kobe Bryant and the victims of that helicopter crash, as we know, over the weekend on Sunday. So there you go. That's always that event always coincides with Super Bowl weekend. You basically, you watch the finish of the Waste Management Phoenix Open. That takes you into, instead of sitting around and trying to just suffer through all that pregame coverage for the Super Bowl, you kind of work your way through the Phoenix Open, the final round of that. That kind of takes you right up to kickoff. What's kickoff? What time's kickoff Sunday? Isn't it about 5:20 Central, I think, for the Niners and the Chiefs?
I'll double check real quick.
Yeah, Josh going to check on that. It's right around 5:30, it seems like, Central when we get kickoff for these Super Bowls. But also on the recruiting front for Alabama, we talked about Carl Tucker, the grad transfer from North Carolina, going to finish up his eligibility, 6th-year senior, with the Alabama Crimson Tide. You got some pretty important visits that coaches are making for this Alabama staff to put a wrap on this 2020 class. Big one tonight over in Lucedale, Mississippi. Nick Saban going in home with All-American defensive lineman McKinley Jackson, the 4-star defensive tackle. Looks like he's down to Alabama-LSU and perhaps Texas A&M here late. Going to prove to be Alabama's strongest competition. Now, when you look at when you're going to hear something final from McKinley Jackson, he's going to do that on National Signing Day, or National Signing Day 2, I guess it is now, really. And that's next Wednesday, 9:30 Central in the morning over there in Lucedale, George County High School. McKinley Jackson will make his college destination known. And he does have, talk about Texas A&M, he does have the official visit to College Station this weekend. So the Aggies going to get last crack at McKinley Jackson. It is believed that Freddie Roach joining this Alabama staff from Ole Miss could help bolster, or should help bolster, Alabama's efforts in landing McKinley Jackson, but would love to pair that guy with Tim Smith, the big man out of the state of Florida who signed with Alabama during the early period. Tim Smith, as we talked about here in the last couple of days, recently took on his 5th star rating from 247sports.com. So McKinley Jackson still out there. Defensive end prospect from Bastrop, Texas, is Alfred Collins, 4-star. This is another one of those sort of 3-team situations, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Texas. I know Hank South that works with us, Tim Watts at BamaOnline.com, have pretty much felt like in-state Texas has had the edge. But Nick Saban has been in home. Freddie Roach here recently was expected to visit with Alfred Collins. And so he is going to make his announcement known. He is going to go public with his choice, Alfred Collins will, on National Signing Day at 3:50 Central. Not 3:49, not 3:51, 3:50 in the afternoon next Wednesday. Alfred Collins will let you know what he's going to do. And then there's Ennis Rakestraw, the 3-star cornerback, also from the state of Texas. He recently took a trip to UA, has Alabama apparently at the top of his list, Missouri and Texas also in that mix for Ennis Rakestraw, who kind of taken on a meteoric ascent here in the late period. And where the situation with Alabama has been in question has been more about the numbers and perhaps how things play out with an Alfred Collins and or a McKinley Jackson as the numbers are tight here down the stretch. You know that Alabama, in terms of the 85 number, is taking on Carl Tucker, the grad transfer tight end. You still have guys from the early period that committed who have yet to sign. Damian George, the big offensive lineman from Houston, Texas, one of those. Javon Baker, the wide receiver. Jamil Burrows, the defensive lineman, both those guys from the state of Georgia. Now, Baker and Burrows still trying to work through some academic issues here over the second half of their senior years of high school. Damian George fully expected to sign with Alabama on Wednesday. And Damian George, one of those guys that initially, at least, based on his friendship and his association with his teammate there at North Shore High School in Houston, Zach Evans, the embattled Zach Evans, I guess you could say in a lot of ways. That recruitment's been interesting because Zach Evans, 6 months ago, it was pretty much a consensus, if not unanimous, that Zach Evans might be the top overall prospect, the running back for the class of 2020. He's had some issues away from football that have sort of dampered his ranking. And so the belief initially was that, well, if you get Damian George, you get Zach Evans. That doesn't appear to be the case. Alabama's interest in Zach Evans waned, I would say, a pretty significant amount, to the point where you saw Alabama more into the recruitment of Jace McClellan down the stretch to go along with Kyle Edwards and Roydell Williams as the 3 running backs in this 2020 class. And Damian George has only helped himself. Damian George went into sort of the postseason and the all-star game circuit kind of as not an also-ran, but a guy that a lot of people weren't really paying much attention to. And then he goes to one of the All-American games and performs extremely well and actually got a boost here, I think, in his latest 247sports.com ranking. You heard the lunch whistle on this Thursday. We're going to tell you about Heat Pizza Bar, downtown Tuscaloosa at Government Plaza. That's right, the best pizza you're going to put in your mouth anywhere, any city. Been to a lot of them. None of them better than Heat Pizza Bar, downtown Tuscaloosa at Government Plaza. Try one of those exclusive pies. They've got the specialty pizzas. They can take care of you if you're just if you're straight cheese or pepperoni guy or gal. They got you covered there too. They got the great appetizers, great salads. Great stuff there at Heat Pizza Bar, downtown Tuscaloosa at Government Plaza. Thanks to Josh Smith for producing the program. Thank you for listening. Until 11 a.m. on Friday. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.